Okay, and then I will be sharing my screen and you guys can let me know if you don't see things, but hopefully I can add people and see my notes and we are good to go here. Okay, let me move you guys over here. Okay, all right, week three asterisk next to it. Um, we are talking about training smart and avoiding plateaus. Obviously, we are striving to build muscle. And so, inevitably, like with all things, we may hit a plateau. That's going to be something that's going to come up. Probably not during this cohort. Um, but obviously, the pursuit of building muscle is not just going to happen during this cohort. Our goal is to give you all the tools and information so that you can carry that forward over the next, hopefully, long period of time and either continue to prioritize building muscle or at least use all of these strategies and tools to optimize in maintaining muscle mass. So understanding this is going to be helpful for long-term success. So, we are talking about today how to avoid plateaus, which I think is going to be really important. So if you guys have any questions as I talk, let me know. And I'll just go ahead and get started. Okay. So what a plateau is and what it is not. So before we dive into breaking plateaus, we need to define what they actually are because I think a lot of times we can think we're in a plateau, long before we really are in a plateau and we start making crazy changes. And so I want to talk about just the science of adaptation and when you start a new program or phase, which you guys have probably realized this, even in just the latest new cycle, if you haven't been doing HF Physique before, you'll usually see strength increases really quickly. And that's not because you're suddenly just building tons of muscle, but because your neuromuscular system becomes more efficient. So when that happens, your body gets better at recruiting the right muscle fibers, coordinating movement patterns, stabilizing joints. This is like a good example of this is I always think of it like with running because it's just such an easy example. When I haven't ran for a long time, and I go to run a mile, everything's hard, right? Just the movement itself is labored. I'm usually running at a slower pace than when I'm really conditioned. But if I run 4 days a week and I do that for a couple of weeks even, my times will dramatically get better. My I will feel a lot better during those runs. Like, and it's not that I'm necessarily improving my fitness significantly in 2 weeks. It's that I'm having those neuromuscular adaptations. My central nervous system is adapting, and just the efficiency of movement is happening so that it's now requiring less energy for me and I'm able to do it better. So it's just like an easy example, but the same thing happens when we are lifting weights. So it's really fun to be a newbie, and it's also kind of fun to have a new cycle of programming. But this usually lasts about 2 to 6 weeks, and after that, your progress is going to naturally slow down, which is normal. That's not a plateau. It's just our physiology, our body adapting. And so, what a real plateau looks like is when your performance metrics stop improving for at least 2 to 4 consecutive weeks, despite consistent training efforts. Um, Sorry, I'm asking my husband if he can bring me my water bottle so I don't cough again. I forgot it at my desk. Um, so, that means if we are not having consistent improvement for 2 to 4 consecutive weeks, meaning we're not adding reps, we're not adding load, our RIR is not decreasing, our form and range aren't improving, and we feel the same or less stimulus from that output. That's when we adjust our programming, not because we're doing anything wrong, but just because our body's fully adapted. Um, and what most of us make a mistake for a plateau, which is where the research is really clear, a lot of times we'll mistake a plateau, and it's actually more so sleep, stress, recovery, menstrual symptoms, motivation, calorie intake, and hydration. All of those things are going to have a much larger impact on day-to-day performance than actual program design. Like most often, it's one of those things that's impacting our performance than like the actual program itself being no longer working for us. So if you notice like your numbers are a lot lower for 1 week, look into and consider, have you slept poorly? Are you stressed? Are you in PMS? Are you under eating carbs? Did you have a higher workload or maybe more travel? Are you carrying inflammation? Those are all signs of likely more so fatigue, stress, or just like normal fluctuations that we can expect. So, science calls these acute performance variability, which is really normal when it comes to training because we're not training in a bubble. We are just living, breathing humans with full, busy lives. So, we're going to have some normal fluctuations in our training. It's not going to be a linear progression week over week. So, if you think a fluctuation is a plateau, which can happen often, I don't know if anyone else is guilty of this. You might jump programs too soon, like switch it up. You might think your training isn't working. I think that is probably a really common one. Just getting frustrated. You might change your calories unnecessarily and you might stop doing the things that are working. So when you understand like a real plateau versus a false plateau, you'll hopefully stay consistent long enough to grow, avoid program hopping, make better adjustments, trust the process, and then that will allow you to build and keep more muscle long term. So, practical application and how we actually use this. If your strength stalls for 1 week, just make a note of it. You don't need to change anything in it. If like you're noticing like, okay, all my numbers are the same as last week, or they are worse than last week, just make a note of it. Okay. Be aware. And then if strength stalls for 2 weeks, assess your recovery. How was sleep? How's my protein intake? How's my stress? How's my hydration? That's why we're tracking like all of these things right now, right? They're all going to be really solid contributors to how we perform. And if strength stalls for 3 to 4 weeks, then that might be a plateau and you can consider making some adjustments. Um, so that's how we train smart. We don't need to react emotionally to those short-term dips, just like we wouldn't do that to in a fat loss phase, right? We're not going to be stressed if like, okay, 1 week we're not seeing continuous new lows on the scale. We're just going to continue to do the things that we know we need to do, make note of it, see if there's anything we can tweak. Tweaks are truly like if I had like a buzzword for how to continuously make progress, it's usually going to come down to tweaking, not overhauling. So that's something to keep in mind too. When we talk about, okay, training, smart training versus hard training, I don't know if this is as much of an issue for our population or kind of clients at HF now, but I know 5 years ago this was more of a thing. I think now there's a lot more research on like just why training hard isn't necessarily the answer always. And I think people have more education on that, where I know 5, 10 years ago, how much you sweat or how exhausted you were after your workout, a lot of times was like the indication of, oh, that was a great workout for people. And I think now we are a little more educated, but maybe not. Maybe this is still something we kind of fall prey to. But when we talk about avoiding plateaus, one of the biggest mistakes we make is thinking the solution is to simply push harder. And more, that might mean more reps, more intensity. That might mean going to like more classes, and pushing more volume. Volume is a big one. I think a lot of times the women we work with are really high achieving. And so in the beginning, more usually is better, but at a certain point, the rate of return is going to diminish. And so doing more is no longer going to yield the same results. Thanks. Um, so instead of hard training, we're going to focus more on training smart because that's going to lead to very different outcomes. So smart training means our training is intentional. It means we're training with a really clear purpose behind every set. You're working near failure with control in that 1 to 3 reps in reserve for most of us, meaning we have 1 to 3 reps left before we hit failure. We're choosing movements that offer the highest return. So, the exercise selection is important, and that's something obviously like I am doing. So you can count on that. We're choosing the movements with the highest return, meaning the exercises that we are using are going to be focusing on the biggest driver, the biggest muscle driver, and also ideally exercises that are going to be most beneficial for the muscles that we are working in terms of movement pattern, resistance profile, all of that. So we're progressing slowly over weeks. We're not forcing it every session. We're resting long enough to actually hit quality reps. So we're taking our rest. We're not doing jump rope in between sets on back squats. We're repeating the same lifts long enough to improve it and to improve them. So our programming isn't going to be super variable, right? We are getting better at the same things week over week. Smart training produces measurable progress because you're giving your muscles a stimulus that they can adapt to. So, what hard training would look like in comparison, hard training is more about effort than strategy. It usually looks like chasing fatigue or sweat, random intensity, showing up tired and just pushing through anyway, cutting rest too short. Assuming more work equals better results, you can work incredibly hard and still not create the right conditions for muscle growth. And that is our goal. Our goal isn't to just work really hard. Our goal is to build muscle and improve our longevity, shape our bodies. Um, and so we need to be really intentional with that. And I think that's like fantastic news. I remember coming from the CrossFit, which obviously you can progressively overload in CrossFit. It's just going to be a lot more kind of random in terms of maybe what your physique results might look like, depending on what your workouts look like, right? Where with HF Physique, we're targeting building a physique and we're targeting the muscles that we're working. So we know what muscles we are building and we're doing that week after week. But the thing that I found to be so interesting when I switched back to more of a hypertrophy based template from CrossFit, where really intensity was everything, was how exciting it was to be able to produce physical aesthetic results that I was after and not be exhausted all the time and exhausted after every training session. So I think that took a little bit of like trusting the process for me in the beginning because I would finish a workout and I would feel okay and I'd be like, "Oh, okay, that was it." Like I pushed hard in the moment, but I don't feel like my whole body is just exhausted. And is that just like, am I even doing anything? Like I didn't even break a sweat on an upper body day. And so that was a little bit, felt just kind of weird. Like I was leaving work on the table. But then I started to notice my body changing, and it was really fun to see that, oh, I can produce these aesthetic results that I want to with my body and not kill myself in the process. So, although on a leg day, it does feel sometimes like you're killing yourself. But I think that's an exciting thing to remember. Like it doesn't have to be exhausting to produce results. So hopefully that's good news. And you can work really, really hard and not produce the kind of results that you want to. So that's important to remember also. Hard training often leads to accumulated fatigue rather than improved performance. So we really want to be intentional. The research behind this is hypertrophy is driven by mechanical tension, training close to failure, appropriate weekly volume, and progressive overload over time. So that's more of a byproduct of hypertrophy, but as strength improves, you should be able to increase load over time or reps over time or all the things kind of we talked about in the previous slides. So we're not measuring how tired you feel after the workout, constantly changing exercises, doing more sets when your performance is declining. So if fatigue outpaces recovery, then our performance is going to trend downward. And that can be kind of a hard hole to dig yourself out of. So it's not somewhere we want to be. And that's when we can start to hit plateaus for sure. So practical applications for Goddess of Gains, on like what smart training looks like in this program. Control, making sure each rep has good form and is in control. We're not like bouncing or just slamming weight. We're really controlled within our reps. We're aiming for the 1 to 3 reps in reserve on our working sets. We're progressing our reps, then our load, then our tempo, not all at once. So focusing on maybe if there's a rep range, like working your way up that rep range and then adding load to come back down to the bottom of the rep range, improving our tempo. We're not rushing our rest periods. We're keeping the main lifts consistent across the phase, which is what I'm doing as programming. And then you're supporting your training with sleep, carbohydrates, protein, hydration. That's how we're going to build strength and muscle while minimizing everything that can lead to a plateau. Okay. All right, so smart recovery. So this week is all about recovery. Hopefully you saw all of the options kind of in the email that was sent out last week on recovery because I want you guys to include 3 recovery sessions this week. You can check that off on Sunday, and there's a lot of options there. So I can talk through that at the end of the call, but most plateaus don't come from the program itself. They come from recovery or lack of it. So we are building, we're training hard. But how well we recover dictates how well we can continue to progress in the gym. And our recovery is going to be influenced by sleep, nutrition, hydration, stress, and how much overall fatigue that you're carrying. So when these areas are inconsistent, then our performance becomes inconsistent, and that's where our progress is going to slow down. So to break it down, for muscle to grow, we need 2 things: a strong mechanical stimulus, and enough recovery to adapt to it. So, if recovery falls short, the stimulus doesn't lead to growth, it leads to accumulated fatigue. And the fatigue can mask our strength gains and make it feel like we're stuck, even when we have really solid programming. So, these are the issues that kind of stall progress far more often than bad programming would. Inconsistent sleep. And I will say, guys, I am guilty of that. We started a new show this week, The Last Frontier, and oh my gosh, it is so intense. And last night I was like, you know what? I had a long day. I'm gonna watch that tonight. And it's so intense. And I finished it and I could not fall asleep. And I can feel it today. I know like my training is not gonna be good. And I've already made a note. I'm not allowed to watch that tonight because I need a more restful night tonight. So it happens to the best of us, even when we know we need good sleep, sometimes, it's just okay, reevaluate. What can I do to get back to good quality sleep? Early bedtime is seriously number one. Not only is inconsistent sleep going to impact our ability to recover, but also our strength as well. I definitely hit a double dose of creatine this morning, so we'll see if that helps with my training later. But that is a big one. Inconsistent sleep, and then also, even if your sleep, I would say secondary to that, if your sleep is consistent, but you're staying up really late and your bedtime is very late, you're missing a lot as far as recovery goes in terms of growth hormone. And so that's going to impact our ability to put on muscle. So if you can get to bed by 10:30, that's going to be really beneficial for you. Number 2 would be not enough protein, a major limiter for repair and adaptation. Like just having those building blocks so that you can have that muscle protein synthesis happening, getting in protein just throughout the day, even 3 meals a day, making sure you're getting in protein. Those meals are built around protein. And the third would be, sorry, low carb intake. Carbs directly support training performance and nervous system recovery. So, getting in quality carbohydrates, especially around your training sessions, training too far from failure. This is another big one, misjudging your RIR. You're working, but you're not providing enough stimulus for growth. So, that's where you're just kind of checking the box on your lifts and not paying attention to how much weight's on the bar, how that feels. And then next would be too much overall stress. Life stress and training stress compounds, reducing performance. So if you're in a stressful season, it might be about just shifting expectations with muscle growth, or it might be evaluating, like, okay, how can I tighten things up? Like, now's not the time of year to watch a TV show before bed. I have a high stress. I need to go to bed early. Or just, thinking of like auditing your day, auditing your week, and where is stress happening for you, and how can you maybe make some tweaks to that. Um, Another one would be changing exercises too often. There's no chance for progressive overload. Rushing rest periods is going to sacrifice mechanical tension and reduce rep quality. So if we're just like going right into the next set, um, you shouldn't even feel like you can do that. So if you feel like you need to cut your rest short, you're probably not going hard enough in your working set. So that's something to consider too. Um, and then taking a deload when you feel like you need one. Fatigue builds, and we don't program deloads into HF Physique because I think that they are going to happen for all of us. Like, we have travel, we have periods of sickness, we have maybe just crazy busy weeks. So planning in yourself a deload week, depending on how you feel, that might be once a quarter, that might be twice a quarter. Usually that's kind of a good rule of thumb for most people, every like 6, 8, or 12 weeks. Taking a week where you are just kind of maybe just getting outside the gym. That might look like doing the same things at 50, 60%, or it might look like just taking rest and getting in a lot of movement that's not necessarily your training. Um, Almost all early plateaus can be traced back to one or more of the factors that I just discussed, not a need for more volume or intensity. So, smart recovery means getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, consistently hitting protein targets, prioritizing carbs around training, staying hydrated, adding electrolytes when needed, managing stress where you can, using steps, mobility, and lighter days to support recovery, and building planned deloads into your program. That's going to be just optimally like how we are able to maintain performance, avoid unnecessary fatigue, and actually make our gym effort count. So, tracking progress. I think this is always like data is always going to be something we talk about with HF because it's so important for assessing how we're doing. If we're not tracking our data, we don't really know how we're doing. And I think it's easy to get emotionally charged when maybe we don't need to be. So, strength progress is going to be our primary indicator for building muscle. Strength trends tell us if the program is working long before body composition changes show up. So, that looks like tracking the load that we're using, the reps we complete, the RIR that we hit. If any of those increases over a few weeks, then we're progressing. Even if the scale is the same, even if photos maybe feel the same, tracking those, we know strength is increasing and we are seeing progress. And it's also how we detect a real plateau too. So tracking your lifts is very, very important and helpful. If lifts, sorry, if lifts stop improving for 2 to 4 weeks despite good recovery, then that's when we would make an adjustment there. And then number two, physique progress. This is going to be slower, but also reliable. Physique changes, those are going to happen slower than strength changes, and they're influenced also by stress, inflammation, cycle symptoms, water retention, sodium intake, and sleep. So that's why we want to take progress photos and body measurements and not get hung up on day-to-day fluctuations. When we zoom out, week over week, month over month, then those trends are going to become a lot more obvious. That's why we look at our data weekly or bi-weekly, not just how we feel the day after we go to sushi or we come off of a flight, or we have terrible sleep. So we're not getting hung up in the daily fluctuations when it comes to physique progress. And um, another one would be performance metrics. And those are often the first thing that we're going to notice. So that would include cleaner reps, deeper range of motion, smoother tempo, better stability, stronger bracing, improved mind muscle connection. Those changes matter because they increase mechanical tension, which is going to be the primary driver of hypertrophy. I think we often overlook progress because it doesn't feel as obvious as like heavier weight on the bar. We often overlook those. But technically, better reps equals a better stimulus, which equals more muscle growth. So we focus on all of these things weekly, not daily, because daily numbers are going to be a lot harder to gauge as our body responds to sleep, hydration, stress, menstrual symptoms, recovery status. So looking at daily fluctuations, I think can be sort of a roller coaster of emotions. But looking at weekly trends will, and then monthly trends, especially in terms of building muscle, is what's going to help us like make smart, objective decisions. So data gives us a lot of clarity. It shows us when to make adjustments, when to stay consistent, when to stay patient. So tracking data is something I highly recommend. And then I'm going to touch on just biofeedback a little bit and also talk a little bit about cycle syncing because I think that's something that gets so much attention on social media. But when you look at the actual research, there's really like no consistent predictable pattern in strength or performance across your menstrual cycle. So some women feel really strong around ovulation. Some feel better late luteal. Some feel really good all cycle long. So the same and also the same woman can have totally different experiences in different months. So instead of building your training around cycle phases, which are going to be really individual and inconsistent, we focus on biofeedback. So, biofeedback is how your body is responding today, which, sorry, this cough is just in my throat, which makes it far more accurate and a lot more actionable. So, strength doesn't reliably peak in any one phase of our menstrual cycle. It's going to vary. Performance is going to vary person to person. Symptoms are going to matter a lot more than hormones and where hormone fluctuations. And then overall, recovery, stress, and sleep have a much larger impact than what phase you're in your cycle. So that's why the fixed, like, train like this in week one, deload in week three advice just like really doesn't hold up. So if that's so ignore your period tracker if it's telling you like this week's not the week to train hard and focus more instead on your biofeedback because that's going to give us real time information on, and I would say even the same thing goes for some of our wearables, right? Like they might tell us a little bit, but if your wearable says today you're feeling like garbage and you feel really good, like, okay, maybe take note of the wearable, but like also go off of how you feel. Um, because all of those things are helpful, but they're not like the only answer. Or the necessarily even they can give you some information to take into consideration, but also just going off of how you feel. How is your sleep quality? How's your stress load? How's your energy? How's your motivation? How's your soreness? How did you feel in your warm up? What are your cycle symptoms if they are present? So those are variables that are going to actually influence performance day to day, and then we can make adjustments based on those signals. We're going to get a lot more productive sessions. So if your warm up, so kind of some things that you use as far as biofeedback goes to adjust your training. So if your warm up feels good, increase load or reps, push closer to failure, expect stronger sets. If your warm up feels sluggish, take longer rest if needed. Reduce the load slightly, increase your RIR, maybe stick to like the 2 to 4 RIR. Keep the main lifts, but maybe pull back intensity. If symptoms are really high, maybe it's PMS, poor sleep, high stress, focus on your technique that day. Slow your tempo down. Drop one of your accessory lifts if needed. Keep moving, but don't force maximal effort. We're responding to today's body, not necessarily the calendar. So the real goal is going to be consistency and quality. Um, and when we rely on like things like cycle syncing, then often we're going to be pulling back when maybe we don't need to, or pushing hard when maybe recovery isn't there. So instead, if we just look at our body's biofeedback, that's going to eliminate all of that, and we're going to be able to keep training consistent and intentional, and that's what's going to be sustainable. So hopefully that's something you guys already know, but I just wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit more too. So how to adjust training based on biofeedback. If energy is low, I talked about that a little bit. Make those adjustments. And just making sure too that we're not just chasing intensity when fatigue is high. So add 1 to 2 RIR. You're still training. You're just stopping a little bit further from failure. Reduce total volume 20 to 30%. This will keep your workout productive without just like overloading your nervous system. Dropping an accessory, prioritizing your main lifts so that those don't suffer, slowing down your tempo. It's not like, okay, we're going to take it easy today. It's just how can we create a stimulus while managing fatigue? Um, so this approach will help you avoid a like avoid having so much fatigue that you do end up hitting a plateau. When you have high energy days, these are the days where the warm up feels smooth, your body feels responsive, your motivation is naturally higher. That's when your strength and power outputs are going to be the highest. So on those days, you can increase your load 2 to 5%, make like small increases, push your top sets. Smart effort is what's going to drive hypertrophy here. So like hit that last set really hard, add a rep or maybe increase weight. Um, and then on those days, that's where you're really able to take advantage of your body's natural fluctuations, um, and see awesome progress there. Okay, programming to prevent plateaus. So HF Physique, we kind of do that, right? We adjust the program every 6 weeks. We have a mesocycle for 12 weeks. So that's kind of long enough that we're able to repeat movements without sticking with them so long that we're all hitting plateaus and not continuously seeing progress. So when you switch exercises too often, you never progress far enough to actually gain strength. You're always kind of in that learning phase. So the stimulus stays low, your results stay low. Sticking with your compound lifts and all of your lifts for a full training block is going to give your body the chance to actually get stronger in them. Consistency is what's going to create that progression, instead of just like trying to produce fatigue through randomness. So we're progressing our reps, our load, our tempo. Most of the time we try to add weight before these things have been maximized. Like, how's our rep quality? Before we add more weight on the bar, is our rep quality looking good? That's why we want you guys to send us those videos, because that's really helpful for us to give you feedback there. How's our overall rep volume? How's our control of the lift? How's our range of motion? Probably don't add 20s on the bar if we're doing quarter squats, right? Instead of full squats. So the most sustainable progression sequence is going to be adding reps, then adding load, maybe adding tempo or range. That's going to help build strength gradually without sacrificing form and increasing injury risk. So keeping on the same programming. Adaptation takes time. You need enough exposure to the same lifts to create measurable overload, a stronger mind muscle connection. As some of you know, like some of the lifts that we're doing at first are harder to have that mind muscle connection on. So like sticking with them long enough to develop that and improving that technical skill. And then also mobility is going to improve your position. So mobility is a performance tool. The better mobility we have, the better positions we're going to be able to get in, the better range of motion, the better tension. So that's why we're adding in mobility in our warm-ups. So be intentional with that too. And from there, what questions do we have? So let me stop screen sharing for a second and we can talk through if anyone has questions on anything, especially on the recovery side. I didn't see, let me, if there were anything in the chat. Okay, let's see. Speaking of deloads, um, if we're sick, when getting better, you're jumping right back into the middle of the training cycle. Yes, you don't need to like, because how we program with HF is you are the one progressing week to week. So your lifts for that 6 week cycle are going to be the same. So just jump right back in on week 4. If you missed week 3, you can jump in on week 4 and just build from week 2 with where you were at. And it might even be not building. It might be, okay, this is just like getting back into the movement this week, maybe keeping your reps in reserve a little bit higher as you are still recovering, and then building that next week. Because that that's where the consistency happens, and also just like paying attention to your biofeedback, like what is 100% for you today, and that's probably going to look different than it did when you were at 100% health 2 weeks ago, right? So keeping that in mind too, and just focusing, what is my 10 RPE, like what's my perceived exertion today, and I'm going to work off of that, and I'm going to make note, like maybe my lifts are less than they were 2 weeks ago. I'm just going to make a note, like still recovering this week, that's okay. um I'm in the same boat on the deload, unintentional deload last week. So just doing your best and moving on, and knowing that you're not going to lose all of your strength in a week either. So
I
don't.
think it's important, yeah, like Michaela said, like know what phase of life you're in. I have a ton of clients that will compare, what they're doing now versus their like pre-baby or, before they had kids. It's like, well, I used to be able to squat this. And I was in the same boat too. It was like, I did it before, I can do it again. And it's not that you can't, but just understand that life is different, right? You have different demands, different responsibilities. Physically, your body has changed as well. And again, it's not that you can't do what you used to, um, but just be focused on like the present day. Obviously, on what you can do, where you're going, instead of kind of comparing things in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, HF Physique will change every 6 weeks. We will typically keep the compound lifts the same. We might move order, and then we'll adjust some of the accessory lifts, but that's what we do every 6 weeks. And then it's a 12-week mesocycle. So it's going to look similar for 12 weeks, but we'll adjust things at the 6 week mark just to keep it interesting and to keep you progressing. And then on tools to track everything, I like the app is a great way to do that too. You can look on the app, you can look at your progress. I think it will show you as the client your progress, right? On the
I
dashboard
think so. It
by
should.
lifts. But you can also, you'll be able to track like where you were lifting the week before, but it should also show you by each exercise, like your best lift and your progress there.
It'll show you your 1 rep max too, which I think is really
Uh-huh.
cool.
Yeah, I think a lifting journal is a good idea. If you have, maybe you could link the one you use, Marita, in our
Oh
group.
yeah.
That would be awesome. And then for 3 recovery activities this week. So some options, 20 to 40-minute walk outdoors, and some light movement. This is kind of the light movement category. Some steady state cardio, some mobility flow, like maybe hitting a yoga class or just doing one online, or taking time to stretch for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Um, some foam rolling, or I don't even really foam roll. It's more just like pressure on any tight areas. Marita, do you mind sharing that in our group too, for those that
Yeah.
maybe aren't live on the
That
call?
is what you asked me. I'm sorry.
No, the chat's great too, just so people, if they listen later, um, have maybe using a Theragun or a lacrosse ball. That's my favorite, especially like you're probably experiencing some tight glutes, tight hips with all of the lower body lifting we do with HF Physique. So that's something to, and same with even like shoulder hitting, laying on a lacrosse ball, doing some range of motion mobility there, and some nervous system resets, getting 5 to 10 minutes of deep breathing, maybe a guided meditation, yoga nidra. even just legs up on the wall for 3 to 5 minutes is such a good nervous system reset. Reading or downtime before bed, that's when I'm
Mhm.
going to implement getting that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I also think just the mental and emotional recharge are big for me. So getting outside, like even 15 minutes of just getting outside and getting sunlight, gratitude journaling, digital detox, coffee date, or time with loved ones, even just like a phone call walk. I love talking. If sometimes um, I have a few neighbors where we all love walking. So if I'm going on a walk, I'll try to like let a neighbor know too. And so getting in some social with outside time and walking is so good for mental health. Maybe listening to like an uplifting podcast, um, a creative outlet, cooking a meal. That's a really good one. That's, like, okay, what's like a high protein meal I can make? Maybe do some meal prep. That feels really good doing that for future you, but also it's like an opportunity to be present in your body and in your day. So those are all ideas. I'd love to hear, and obviously anything that's not on this list, like what are 3 recovery type sessions that you plan on implementing this week? I'd love it if you shared those in the group. And um, how do you use red light and what does it do? I've seen it on Instagram, but I don't know much about it. So red light is, oh gosh, I probably am gonna butcher this, but I have a mito red light, so it's infrared and it's got far red light and it has near infrared. And so it penetrates in through my skin, deep into my body's tissues, and it's really beneficial for mitochondrial health. That's something that I'm not as knowledgeable in, but what I have noticed for me, I've used my red light for probably, gosh, 4 years now. I don't know, 3 years at least. This is probably my fourth winter. It From what I understand, it helps increase your body's ATP production, which helps with cellular function. So I noticed that in the winter, like more energy, better mood. I think of it like in simple terms as like a supplement to the sun. Like it's not going to be a replacement for me getting outside and getting sunlight, but it helps fill in the gaps for sure. And I notice that I really crave it in the winter time, probably because I'm just not outside as much. An infrared sauna would be giving you the far red light, but not that near infrared. Unless you have an infrared panel in your sauna, which I did. I do have one. I just don't always turn mine on. But a red light sauna is going to be great, but it won't have the near infrared. So that far red light is going to produce heat. And it's just not going to penetrate more on like on the cellular level. Um, so it's beneficial, but it's a little bit different because it just has different wavelengths of light than this. And obviously, like if you can just get outside every day, that's going to be best. But since I'm at my computer in the winter, I like to use it when I'm at my computer. I can send some podcasts though. There's a lot of information on red light. I think we've had David on our team come in and talk. He's really, really researched on red light. We've had him come in and talk about benefits of red light, but I'll share some things. I have the Mito red light. It's like the 300 Pro, but I know there's an EMR Tech brand, I think that's really good too. I haven't tried theirs though. I'm better at active recovery, mobility, foam rolling, gentle yoga, walking, but I like to prioritize like things, breathing, journaling. So hoping to do one of those this week. Hard to shut the busy brain off sometimes. For sure. I like more active things too. For that reason, I have a hard time just like sitting and breathing or just sitting in I do like breath work more than just like sitting and meditating. That's a really hard one for me. But I love gratitude journaling is so great for our nervous system. And I always say this, but I love the practice of like now's a really good time, for 30 days to do just drains and charges. So I think we're always now, especially end of the year, is a really good time to think about like what is adding to my life and what is taking away, like what's draining me consistently. So having a journal and writing down 3 things a day. What are 3 drains, 3 charges? And it can be so simple. Like 3 drains would be like picking up the same clothes every day off the floor, that my kids drop or whatever, and or like the negative neighbor that I always get in the conversation with that just leaves me feeling down after. Or maybe it's skipping breakfast because then I feel like garbage every afternoon. And then three charges could be getting outside for 10 minutes while I have my morning coffee, getting in my weightlifting session, calling that friend, like, or sending doing a FaceTime session with a friend, or reading for 10 minutes, or whatever they are. Like, they don't have to be big things. And just writing those down and making that a practice, and challenging yourself to do that for 30 days is so cool, because you'll start to notice consistently the things that are draining you, where if you're not making note of them daily, I'm sorry, it's really easy to not pick up on them, right? To not notice, and to not notice trends. So tracking that like you would other data, tracking drains, charge, keep, it can be complex, like date night, whatever. Or it can be just like really simple things. And then you can start to make notice like, oh, wow, I'm consistently having those drains in my life. How can I make some tweaks so that I'm eliminating those? Or how can I like be really intentional with adding those things that are really adding a lot to my day? So that's something that I think is really cool to do this time of year, because then you can go into January and just look through that journal of 30 days and see like what are some things that I'm noticing and what are some changes that I can make going into 2026. That's like a kind of an active thing, because sometimes I think it's like a little different variation of a gratitude journal that I like. And then I think walking is so helpful too. Walking outside, especially if you have a hard time like sitting still, that's such a good recovery option, because it really helps with your nervous system reset, as well as like getting in some good movement, blood flow, and calming your nervous system, and getting all the benefits from nature too, right? Anything else that you guys have questions on, or that we could add for this week? How are we feeling with nutrition? How are we feeling with protein intake? How are we feeling with other habits? How are we feeling with lifts and intensity there? Obviously, I think a lot of us are kind of coming off of sickness and stuff. So maybe setting some new goals for this week with lifting and getting back into the gym, knowing it's consistency over time that adds up. So we would love to look at lifts this week in the group, and we'd love it if you shared your recovery activities that you are committing to, and just like making note of how you feel as you do so. And excited for week 4 next week. For those of you that want to do um, the Goddess of Gains momentum and continue for another 5 weeks, that's an option as well. And let us know if you have any questions on anything. And we'll go into our official week 4 next week. But excited to make this week all about recovery, which I think a lot of us need this time of year. I know I do. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for joining, and have a great day today. Thanks, ladies.
Bye.